welcome. Kind request, please put yourselves on mute so we remove any background noise. All right, today's guests are Mark Yaxley, the co-founder and CEO of Strategic Wealth Preservation. This is a precious metal dealer and storage provider that is based out of the Cayman Islands. Some of you might know Mark for his educational material on YouTube that is called Inside the Vault. We will make sure to link this page in the replay newsletter of this webinar. We also have Jeremy Varlow, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, who is in charge of the affiliate partnerships. And Jeremy is also going to be the main go-to person for the Paid Mavericks members who are interested in storing with Strategic Wealth Preservation and benefit from the exclusive discounts available to them. We will discuss more on that soon. But first, guys, welcome and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, well, the plan for today is to discuss with Strategic Wealth Preservation, which is our trusted vault provider in the Cayman Islands, and understand what type of services they offer in order to purchase, store, and move metal across the world. We will also briefly touch on Strategic Wealth Preservation Capital, which is a distinct entity, like legal entity, acting under the same brand of SWP, providing liquidity services, and Jeremy will say more about that. And then we can move into the Q&A. We'll also take any live questions if you have. So if you just raise your hand, post the question on the chat, we'll make sure to go through everything. All right, so Mark, Jeremy, over to you. Would you like to start with an overview of SWP?
Sure, thanks, Denisa, and welcome inside of our vault here in Grand Cayman. We hope that you've got a nice view of the backdrop here where Jeremy and I are sitting today. I thought we could kick things off with a brief overview of SWP's core services, and from there spend the rest of the time in the Q&A session. So the initial presentation is designed to be fairly simple and cover the basics. And then, like I said, we can take as much time as you like with the Q&A session afterwards. Okay, a little bit about SWP. We've just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We founded the company in 2014 and took our first deposit of precious metals in 2015. We are headquartered here in the Cayman Islands, which is something that we'll speak about quite a bit during the presentation. All of our transactions and client data is stored here in Grand Cayman, which is rather unique. Our business model is relatively simple. We offer two core services. The first being that we're a precious metals dealer, and what that means is that we sell physical precious metals to our clients, and we also make an active buyback market. So we buy precious metals from our clients, essentially offering them a two-way market. And we're a secure storage provider. We own and operate a large Class 3 storage facility here in Grand Cayman, and we offer other storage options around the world in strategic locations, which we'll touch on in just a minute. We do cater to a variety of clients, anywhere from young investors all the way up to family offices and everything in between. Our specialty, I guess you could say, would be mid to high net worth individuals. Majority of our clients being Americans and Canadians, but we do have clients, active clients with us from all over the world, whether it be Europe, Asia, and Latin America. We do have a number of distinctions, but I've listed two here in the presentation that we're very proud of. We are a member of the London Bullion Market Association, which is essentially the highest tier that you can reach within the precious metals industry. Our application was accepted in 2024, and we've made the most of that relationship thus far. And we're also an approved distributor of the Royal Mint of England, which is rather difficult to achieve. So we're very proud of that distinction and the ability to trade directly with the likes of the Royal Mint, as well as other refineries that we offer to our clients. In terms of the assets that we store, we currently have about $1.4 billion worth of physical precious metals in storage. The majority of that metal is currently stored with us here in Grand Cayman. And the balance is spread out over 11 other locations worldwide that we offer our clients. We're fully insured by Lloyd's of London. The insurance policy is held with Marsh, as you can see there. And we do conduct both physical and financial audits. The financial audits conducted by Grant Thornton, and the physical audits conducted by ALS Global, which is an audit firm that specializes in commodity audits, whether it be oil and gas, corn audits, or in this case, precious metal audits. They actually visit all of the locations that we offer once per year and account for every single ounce that we store on behalf of our clients. We trade strictly at this point in time in physical precious metals. Of course, Jeremy will touch on SWP Capital, which is a separate entity that lends against metals. But in terms of SWP, our core business being that we trade and store physical precious metals, including gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Most of the products that we sell or purchase from our clients are either LBMA, COMEX approved brands, or produced by sovereign mints. So that could be the Royal Canadian Mint, for example, US Mint, the Royal Mint of England, and or LBMA or COMEX brands, which essentially means that the products that we're trading are very liquid and are recognized internationally. So whether you be buying or selling them with us here in Cayman or in Singapore, all of these products are competitively priced and liquid in those markets. We sell products ranging from 1 ounce all the way up to 1,000 ounce silver bars, and we can touch a little bit on that during the Q&A. Interestingly enough, we do accept a number of currencies for settlement of orders, including cryptocurrency. So if you want to buy or sell using cryptocurrency, that is something that we've accommodated since 2018. We're quite well versed. Jeremy, in fact, is our in-house specialist in terms of crypto, and we can facilitate those transactions. The picture that you see there on your screen is actually taken inside of this vault where Jeremy and I are sitting, which is our flagship vault here in Grand Cayman. It is a Class 3 UL rated vault, which is the highest rating that a vault can have in the North American space. The vaults in Europe have a different class system, but it would be the equivalent of a Class 10 in Europe. All of the, as I mentioned earlier, all of the holdings within this vault are subject to external annual audits, which basically means every box that you see here on the shelves is opened and every single product is accounted for and reported back to the client. We also conduct internal monthly audits using our own internal controls, which is just another way of ensuring that all of the metal is accounted for. We can focus in on accounts, for example, that had transactions take place within the last 30 days and verify that everything was executed properly. And most importantly, whenever you're dealing with the storage of physical assets is the underlying insurance. Every single ounce in this vault and the other vaults that we offer to our clients is fully insured for its replacement value. Have focused a little bit thus far, and a lot of today's conversation will be on Grand Cayman, I expect, but we do offer 11 other locations spread out throughout the world, including 5 in the United States, 2 in Canada, and more traditional markets such as Zurich, Singapore, most recently Dubai, and New Zealand. All of those strategic locations are available through one account that you hold with SWP. So for example, if you wanted to store metal in the United States, in Grand Cayman, and in Zurich, that would be completely possible through your single SWP account and working with one account representative like Jeremy here. Also considering adding London and Panama as future locations based on client demand. And lastly, wanted to talk a little bit about the Cayman Islands. Obviously, we are headquartered here, which is quite unique. We are the only significantly sized precious metals and storage facility located in Grand Cayman. It was a strategic decision of ours to open the facility here back in 2014 because we wanted to cater to a very underserved North American market. Typically, the U.S. market had been served by the likes of Zurich and Singapore, and we felt there was a great opportunity to offer an offshore storage facility and precious metals dealership to those clients. We are a regulated business, of course. We're regulated by the Department of Commerce and Investment. However, we do not have any reporting requirements to local or foreign governments in terms of our clients' holdings or transactions. So that's one of the key advantages to SWP. all of those transactions are completed and recorded here locally. All of our sales staff, all of our marketing and solicitation staff are located here in Grand Cayman. A few other notable advantages here in Grand Cayman is there is no import or export duty on precious metals in or out of the country. There's also no sales tax on the sale of metals or storage of metals. And if you are looking to visit us, it's actually a rather easy place to get to. It's only, believe it or not, 3.5 hours from Canada by flight and a few hours from most American destinations. There are flights from Europe to Grand Cayman as well. I'll stop sharing now, Denisa, and if you'd like to...
Great. Thanks a lot, Mark, for that. We'll take any live questions. I'll start with the big picture. One which focuses on the jurisdiction that you've chosen, Cayman Islands. You said that it was a strategic decision to serve the Americas, but why precisely Cayman Island? Why not another Caribbean jurisdiction? Is there any? Are there any additional reasons why you chose Cayman Island in particular?
There are a number of reasons, Denisa, why Cayman is regarded as the premier, I guess you could say, Caribbean island for a number of reasons. First of all, the economy in the Cayman Islands is very, very healthy. The quality of life on the island is very good. It is a first world country in the truest sense. I think anyone who's had the opportunity to visit, including yourself, would agree that they maintain a very high level or living standard here in Grand Cayman. And that's the result of stable government. This is a country that's been well governed. It's a relatively young country, so they benefit from the fact that they're not necessarily weighed down by centuries of government and laws and regulations. It's also a country that understands very clearly that the financial services industry is a bedrock or cornerstone of their economy. So they're very supportive of businesses like SWPs, for example. Generally speaking, we can count on our government to do a good job of regulating and not necessarily over-regulating the business, which is to the advantage of our clients, of course. Like I mentioned earlier, no taxation here. Corporate tax, personal income tax, sales tax, those are all things that are advantageous not only for the business, but also for our clients who are transacting with us. And in simple terms, some things that you might overlook when you're selecting a jurisdiction is the fact that it's an English-speaking country. They accept US dollars. They're in the same time zone as many of our clients, or in time zones that allow them to transact with us during trading hours. And those are simple things, but when you talk about a relationship with a service provider, it can be quite important.
Thank you. Regarding your point on taxation, that there is no government tax on anything, I know that there was a time where the government put an import tax, I think, on gold, and they've realized that it was a bad idea and they've dropped it subsequently. But the question here for the majority of the people that will probably plan to store in Cayman is what would happen in the event that this happens again, for how are clients affected, and if there are any safeguards that you've put in place as a business since you've transitioned this episode.
Yeah, it was so a little bit of context, which is always important when discussing something like that. So COVID, 2020 through 2022 obviously had an impact on the island's tourism business, which is its number one economic driver. They receive a lot of tourists here on these beautiful beaches in the Cayman Islands. That dried up during COVID. So coming out of COVID, the government had some revenue shortfalls, and they were looking for ways to augment their revenue and fill up the coffers once again. SWP during that period of time and years prior had been very successful, and we'd been importing a lot of gold to the island because clients recognized the value in the business. And government, without consultation, actually went ahead and imposed a 4% import tariff only on gold. And we found out through a reporter calling the business one day and asking us for comment. the miscalculation that the government made is that they thought we would just go on as things were and continue importing the same amount of gold to the island, and they would earn revenue from that. But what they didn't realize is that precious metals in bullion form is an investment product, and you can't tax an investment that way. If you impose a tariff or a tax on an investment, it would render SWP and effectively, the Cayman Islands non-competitive in the field. So what we did is we stopped importing gold, and we didn't import gold for a total of 18 months. The government earned zero revenue. In fact, the whole thing cost them money in the end because they had to go through the trouble of implementing the whole thing. And they called us after about 12 months and said, look, we've made a mistake. What can we do to backpedal out of the situation? And really, it was a lesson learned for the government here. Obviously, it's helped our dialogue with government with regards to what we do, and they now understand that this is an investment business, much like selling stocks or other investment products, that they can't earn a living or earn revenue from us the same way that they did previously. It also forced us to diversify the locations that we offer our clients. And so we leaned into other international vaults like Zurich, for example, Singapore. We sent a lot of business there. Texas is another very popular location with our clients. So we leaned into that as well. But to answer your question, I think the government has squarely learned their lesson because it was a failed experiment on their behalf. I'm happy to say.
Well, I think it's a great case study of how the government system kind of works. They don't think of the second layer consequences of their action. What's nice about Cayman, from the stories that I've heard from multiple people living here for a long time, is that because the population is so small here and so knowledgeable, the citizens, they're actually very close to the government. So it's not the same situation as with the federal government of the United States, for example. You can't really reach anyone unless you are Google or some other monster. So that's a good case study. But I think it's also important to probably highlight that for the customers that already had metal stored with you, they wouldn't have been affected in any way, correct?
That's correct. So even though we were temporarily not importing gold to the country, we were still actively buying gold that was being sold to us in the vault. So once metal has already landed on the island, it's cleared import, the customs and the border, then it was free of any tax or import duty. So we were still making a liquid market within the vault. In fact, we were bidding quite competitively on the gold because we had clients who wanted to purchase gold in Grand Cayman as well. And any metal that was exported or leaving the country was not subject, nor was silver, platinum, or palladium subject to the temporary tariff.
Great. So basically, there are zero tax on anything related to my metal storage if I would store with you, right? Even on the profit sale. So say I buy gold now at 3,000 and I sell it back to you at 10,000. I'm not taxed on the profit of that sale, correct?
So what you're describing would most likely, depending on where people are joining from, would be considered a capital gain. Capital gains tax, just because you're storing an asset in Grand Cayman, does not exclude you from capital gains in your own jurisdiction. So the Cayman Islands, to be clear, is not taxing anyone's profits. In fact, SWP is not obligated to report any of your transactions or any of your holdings. But the fact that you've realized a capital gain is actually a personal income tax issue that you have in your own country. So whether you live in the UK, whether you live in Dubai, whether you live in Canada, you have to look at your own personal income tax situation to know whether or not you'd have to report a capital gain.
Okay. But if I'd be a tax resident in Cayman, certainly I would have zero tax. And as far as I understand, there is zero reporting of the Cayman, of SWP to the Cayman Island government or to any other government of the amount of people, the amount of metal that people store with you. Is this correct?
That is correct. Again, we don't have any report, like a bank has reporting obligations with regards to client balances and client transactions within the financial system. We do not have those same reporting requirements. We fall outside of the banking system. So your transactions and your holdings are not reported to local or foreign governments. And to answer your question, yes, if you are a resident of the Cayman Islands or any jurisdiction that didn't have any personal income tax, then you would not be subject to capital gains either.
Great. All right, we have a question here about the onboarding process. How easy or cumbersome the onboarding process is, particularly for people that are out of the Cayman, that are not in the Cayman Island, of course.
I will happily jump in on this. It's a relatively straightforward and simple process. You can sign up for an account through our website, www.swpcayman.com. On the top right-hand section of the website, you'll see a little button. It looks like a little person. Click on that. There's an open account button. It's as simple as putting your email address in. We will send you a temporary password. You then use that to add your own password. That'll take you to a screen that shows our different account types. So we have 3 different account types. There is a single or joint account. So that would be, myself signing up for an account, Jeremy Varlow. Maybe I want to join account with Mark. The second account type is a business or corporate account, and the third being a trust account. For the first type, the single or joint account, it's as simple as filling out the form, adding a piece of ID and a proof of address. So this would be, a lease agreement, a bank statement, a utility bill. For the business and trust accounts, a little bit more detailed in the sense that you would need, a securities or shareholders register, etc. Once that's submitted, which typically doesn't take longer than 20-30 minutes to fill out, our onboarding and compliance team will review the application. They typically get back within 24 hours with the account approval, which would come to myself as the account representative. I will then reach out to the applicant, let them know that their account's been approved, and also include a copy of our storage agreement. After a signature of that storage agreement, the account is open and ready for transactions. I mean, all of this can be finalized within typically about 48 hours. So yeah, it's quite a straightforward and simple process.
Great. I can certify to that. And I think it's probably thanks to the Cayman Island regulations. If you do the same in Singapore, it's a whole different story. Somebody else asks about whether the Cayman Islands are on the CRS list. And I see that John has already answered. Would you like to comment on anything regarding that, Mark and Jeremy?
And I'm the abbreviation I'm not familiar with. I apologize. The CRS list.
It's the equivalent of FATCA tax regulation, if I'm not
mistaken.
Yeah.
The common reporting standard. It's a worldwide standard where only the US is not a participant of.
We have never had to complete any documentation or any reporting at all with regards to that standard. No.
They report all your data, all your revenue on within the network. In the world, we are not worldwide. Yes, we're not. I mean, it's only, of course, limited to the real financial world, let's say.
Yes, financial institutions. Yeah, we're not listed as a financial institution.
Okay, thank you.
We're actually listed as an active non-financial institution as our official listing.
That's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. And the next question is, how can somebody transfer physical metal from Europe to you? Or as a matter of fact, we can discuss about any limitations across jurisdictions, if any, to ship metal or to send metal, redeem or ship.
We have our own dedicated in-house logistics team who handles all of this for us. So, for example, you set up an account with us, you say, I have metals that I'm holding in Zurich, for example, and I'd like to move those to the Cayman Islands. We would ask you for, an inventory of those metals that you're wishing to move. And once we receive that from you, hand that off to our logistics team. They will source quotes from different partners that we use. For example, we'll use FedEx. It could be Loomis, Brinks. We have a couple other independent partners that we use. And we'll basically come to the client and say, here are a couple of options on how we can move these metals. We can proceed from there. Yeah, it's again a relatively painless process, and yeah, something that we can handle from end to end for the client.
Yeah, probably important to note that our team handles and prepares all of the paperwork, because that's generally where that gets a little bit more cumbersome, is on the export and import side of things. And we handle all of the documentation along with our partners so that the client doesn't have to fumble through what can be fairly complicated if they're not used to shipping physical metal.
Okay, and I guess that the timelines and potential specific special circumstances would depend on each country and each jurisdiction, right? That you're shipping the metal to or from.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no, when it comes to international logistics, there is no blanket answer or one size fits all. You have different regulations in different countries, which we're accustomed to. Really, the more challenging issue, if there were to be one, is when you're shipping metal from a second or third world country, there can be insurance limitations. The carriers themselves, whether it be FedEx, Loomis, Brinks, they may impose some sort of insurance limitations because of corruption or the possibility of theft. But all those things would be disclosed to the client right at the forefront of the operation. So if they said, if it simply weren't possible, or if there were limitations, we would advise the client at the beginning of that conversation, essentially.
Right. Elaine asks if you accept clients who are residents or citizens of a country that are currently under sanction from Western governments like Russia, Venezuela, Iran.
So it's a two-part answer. And because SWP is regulated by the Department of Commerce and Investment here in the Cayman Islands, that governing body does have sanctions lists that would not allow us to do business with residents of certain countries. And we publish that list, I believe, in our terms and conditions, and it's available through the account representatives as well. There are other countries, I guess you could say, that are gray listed, where we can onboard residents of those countries, but they would be considered higher risk. They're basically, and Cayman used to be one. So we feel, you know, we are sensitive to that issue, because at one point Cayman was actually gray listed by the EU. So as a business, we understand that people choose to live in places that certain governments, Western governments, may not find as appealing for whatever political reason. But there are some countries where there would be basically enhanced due diligence on the resident, but we would be able to onboard them anyways. And all of that, again, would be part of the onboarding process, and the account representative could let the person know at the time that they apply. People with multiple passports can take advantage of that status in certain cases. If you happen to be born in a place that Western government weren't a fan of, but currently live in a jurisdiction or hold a passport in a jurisdiction that's more friendly, then we'd be able to onboard the person.
Okay. So if it's gray listed, you can still onboard, but it takes longer, basically, to open an account, right?
Not necessarily the length of time. Yeah, not necessarily the length of time, Denisa, but more so there may be a few more questions posed by the onboarding team.
Okay. Noted. All right, I'll go back to some of my questions, because I see that there are no more live questions on the chat. Regarding limits to buy and store and insure metal, are there any limits that people need to be aware of? For example, the minimum storage limit, perhaps, and the maximum, and if there are any exclusions in the insurance policy regarding this.
So I can talk to kind of the purchase and storage limits, so to speak. For purchase, we do have minimum quantities when making a purchase. So it's either 2 ounces of gold, 200 ounces of silver, or a combination thereof. So you could, purchase an ounce of gold and 100 ounces of silver at a time, that would qualify as a qualified minimum purchase. For storage, we do have a $50 quarterly minimum. Our storage rates are based on the value of metals held, and I know that we have an offer for your members, which we'll get to later, but our typical storage rates are from $0 to $250,000 to $250,000 to $1 million and $1 million and above. And as the value of metals held increases, that percentage rate drops. We do charge our storage quarterly in arrears. So for example, we are now in March. So shortly, I guess at the beginning of April, our next storage invoices will go out for the previous quarter. The rates that are listed on the website are annual rates, but you could kind of, do the reverse math to understand what you would likely pay based on your metals held with us.
And you touched on insurance. Happy to jump in there. So as I mentioned in the presentation, Denise, the metals that are in storage here in Grand Cayman and the other locations that we offered are insured for full replacement value based on the market value at the time that a loss is reported. I'm happy to say we've never had a loss or made a claim to our insurance company through over 10 years of business. But if it were to happen, the metals are, like I said, insured for full replacement value. The current industry cap for insurance in one particular building, this keeps moving up because the price of metals keeps increasing. So the underwriters are kind of forced at this point to make higher limits, is about $3 billion US. So here in Grand Cayman, we have just over 1 billion in storage. So we still have a lot of room before we have to have that conversation with our insurance company. But there are facilities in the United States and in Zurich that are reaching or have reached that $3 billion cap in one building. And generally all that means is they'll build a second building right next to it to attain more insurance.
Okay. And in terms of, because I know that Cayman had a really bad hurricane in 2004. Obviously, the vault wasn't there. But does the insurance cover in case of another similar disaster?
It does. It was actually my first question when I took this job almost 11 years ago. And it was our first request when we purchased the insurance through Marsh and Lloyd's. It is insured for hurricane and for flooding, which would be kind of the secondary effect of a hurricane. And I like to tell people, I mean, the facility itself is over-engineered. This building will be standing here in 1,000 years, regardless of where the planet is at that point in time. The Class 3 UL vaults are bunkers inside of a bunker, but more importantly, keep in mind, water doesn't damage precious metals. So even in a worst case scenario where you had a large flood, essentially there wouldn't be any, significant damage to the holdings in this facility.
That's good to know. Okay. Elaine is asking, regarding jurisdiction under sanction, do you make any difference between the place of residence versus the citizenship of a person? And I understand that they can use this to their advantage, right? So if they are the citizen of Iran, but they have a second passport, for example, or they have residency in another place, they could potentially store with you, or?
Yeah, they would have to provide proof of residency in the second jurisdiction. If they have a second passport, even better, because then it's, effectively they can utilize that passport. If Elaine has a specific scenario, best that we ask our onboarding team, and they can provide her with a detailed answer. But long story short, yes, there have been scenarios. Obviously, our clients are international, where they were born in a particular jurisdiction and currently living in another. As long as they can prove that, that's really the most important piece, is where they are currently residents, not only vacationing or staying temporarily. It would actually be, residing would be of importance.
Okay. Pierre also asks about war risk insurance, and Pierre, if you want to elaborate what exactly you mean, whether Cayman is going to be blown over by a bomb, or
Well, yes.
What are we talking?
For example, Mr. Trump, he wants to occupy Greenland, or he wants to take the Panama Canal, or tomorrow he wants to move into the Cayman Islands, which I think it's not very difficult for an American defense. So what do we do? Like the sanctions with Russia. You have some gold in Russia, let's say, and okay, the Americans and also the Western Europeans, they say we put a sanction on. You cannot anymore move it out. What is the insurance then?
Well, so yeah, go ahead, Denise.
I wanted to say that we should touch this probably from the perspective of looking at Cayman Islands as a safe haven jurisdiction in the future, just like we look at UAE or Singapore, and how long they have left until the big guy will wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to own that. And it's probably best, Mark, to discuss a little bit of the background of who of the independence of Cayman Islands, because they are under British protectorate, but at the same time, I know that there is a lot of wealth invested from American people here. And also, probably the most important is that it seems that there are a lot of old money, like wealth, that is being stored here in different ways. So as our friend Steve, that we will soon have him in a webinar in the future, he's based in the Cayman Islands, he always says that, you know, these psychopaths, sometimes they need a place where they store stuff. They have their own wealth, so they have to keep some places safeguarded. Hopefully, Cayman Islands is going to be one of them. But anyways, I think it's interesting to discuss about this, the geopolitics around.
Yeah, and so to answer the initial question, there is an exclusion, and this is not only SWP, but industry-wide, generally for war and acts of terrorism when it comes to insurance policies for precious metal vaults. It is not a standard inclusion. In fact, it is very much a standard exclusion from these policies that the underwriters have. To touch on the second point, the Cayman Islands is a British overseas territory, so it is under the protectorate of the United Kingdom. And for example, and there is no history, it's important to say there's no history of conflict on the islands, and this country does not involve itself in any type of international conflict. It does not have a standing army. It is a neutral country, very much so. And quite frankly, from a strategic point of view, it has no resources, no natural resources, and is not located in a part of the world that would be advantageous to any military to occupy. But in the case that it were, obviously there's a responsibility of the United Kingdom to protect the island. Important to note, we talk about it, and we hear this a lot from our clients. A lot of our clients are American, so this is top of mind for them. They say, well, what if Mr. Trump or another government decides that they want the gold in your vaults? Well, quite frankly, $1 billion is not much of a drop in the bucket for the United States government in terms of their debt. They have much simpler access to retirement savings in the United States in the form of IRAs and other registered accounts, not to mention checking accounts, savings accounts, trading accounts. I mean, literally, they have access to trillions of dollars within their own borders without crossing into another G7 partner's territory to confiscate what would amount to a relatively small amount of money. And you talked about old money, Denise, in the Cayman Islands. Yes, there's some old money here, and people think of Cayman as a financial center, but most of that financial services is really back office services. The actual underlying assets in most cases do not actually reside here in Grand Cayman, simply are served here in Grand Cayman in terms of the fund administration, the trust administration, and so on. Most of those decisions and actual underlying assets are in major markets like New York City, for example, or Chicago or London, and not actually here in Grand Cayman. So again, the likelihood of that happening is extremely low, and that's why Grand Cayman is considered a premier offshore jurisdiction for the reasons that it's extremely low risk internationally.
Yes, and I'll add to that's why they don't want to tamper with the regulatory process here, because it just makes the people that administer their trust funds, etc., from here, they would just have a lot of things to lose and a lot of headache, even though the assets are not physically here. All right, somebody asks, Floyd asks, whether people from the US show up in Cayman with a few coins to store, and have they reported any issues leaving the US with a few coins? And I think your experience, Mark, that you just mentioned of moving large amounts of physical metal through the borders, it's probably relevant to discuss here.
I've, in my career, about 20 years now in the field, I have traveled with precious metals a number of times. From Canada to the US, from the US to Canada, US to Cayman, Cayman to US. I've been in the back rooms at JFK Airport where I voluntarily told them that I was carrying above the limit. I told Denise about this story. I wanted to test the system. So I have a lot of experience. There is, first of all, when you're carrying precious metals, exiting a country is a lot less of a hassle, because you're not generally going through customs on the way out of a country, you're going through customs on the way into a country. So in the United States, for example, the only real hassle you might have is through the security area in the airport. When you have those coins in your pockets or your personal effects, they would come up in the X-ray machine if you're going through them. So you can prepare yourself maybe for a secondary search. If you're uncomfortable with being searched in public, you would want to go into a side room, but it's completely legal to carry personal property, including precious metals, outside of a country. So you can do that. It's when you enter a country, people get nervous about the $10,000 declaration amount. But again, it doesn't mean it's illegal to carry more than $10,000 worth of metal. It only means you have to declare it. And what I was saying to you the other day, Denise, is if you do declare it, if you have copies of your purchase invoices, that's great. Or if you have a solid story as to why you're carrying the metals, that's really what you have to be ready for. You shouldn't be worried about seizure of those assets, because it is your personal property, which is a very strong legal argument that you can use.
There you go. Yes, I think this is an excellent example. Floyd, I hope this answered your question. Great. So you've no reports from clients that had problems, he asks.
We've had hundreds of clients hand carry metals to Cayman over the years. I can think of I could count on less than one hand those who have experienced problems. And the one that experienced problems was, he was a lawyer from the US, a young lawyer from the US, who I would guess was not very polite with the Caymanian customs agent when he arrived. And when he was asked, in this kind of secondary questioning, what are you doing? Why are you carrying these metals? He was coming to deliver them to us, actually. He was, I would say, did not provide the information, didn't have copies of his purchase invoices available, and he had some problems with the coins entering. We did manage to recover them from customs. They were later deposited in the vault. All ended well. But that is one of the only times out of literally hundreds of our clients who've hand carried them that I can think of an issue. So you can never guarantee the behavior of a customs agent, but from a legal standpoint, it is perfectly legal to travel to and from Cayman with coins.
And I would add, it's probably easier to bring in bullion than bring a fresh fruit. Or last time I had an avocado and they confiscated it because it might have had some, I don't know what's the law here, but apparently anything that is eatable, you cannot bring it in. All right, I think we have a little bit of time left to discuss about strategic wealth preservation capital. And I wanted to discuss this more from a risk perspective of people that are storing their metal but are not interested in lending it, and perhaps making a distinction between the two businesses and what exactly this liquidity entails, because it's not a bank, it's not a financial service institution. It's merely a way to give liquidity to people as opposed to selling their gold. So would you like to discuss, to just briefly present what the company does, and then I'll ask some further questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah, so one of the things that we have found is that precious metals investors do not want to sell their metals. This is an asset that you want to hold for, the long term, for, as an investment, as a wealth preservation tool. You're happy to have it on the shelf, tucked away in the Cayman Islands for 10, 15, 20 plus years. And the day inevitably comes that you need some access to liquidity, and, whether it be for living expenses, medical expenses, to buy a new property, whatever the case may be. And we saw an opportunity to service our clients without them having to sell those metals. So to give you an example of how it works. So an investor comes to us, says, I want to borrow some money against my metals. Let's say, for the ease of math, they want a $100,000 loan. We offer different terms of 3, 6, 9, and 12 months at US Prime +1, which is right now 8.5%. We'll see what happens in mid-March, but looks like it'll probably stay that way. When they come to us, they ask for $100,000 at 12 months, let's say. We collateralize that loan at 135%, or a loan to value of 75%. So what that means is they must have $135,000 worth of metals here in the Cayman vault that they would like to use as collateral. They fill out an application form, goes through the onboarding process, much like an account application, takes about the same amount of time. Once that's approved, we begin drawing up those loan documents. They review them, accept them, and we are off to the races. Once everything is settled and they've filled out their paperwork, we then go out to a base of lenders. We've got a very extensive base of lenders. This is, anyone from another client of ours up to institutions that have capital to lend. We will basically present the loan as an opportunity to them. Somebody comes along and accepts that loan, and we drop their paperwork as well. Once both sides have filled out their paperwork, we then finalize the loan. We will take the metals that are used and held as collateral and move it into our SWP Capital section of the vault. Those metals will still, they will have the loan account number, but will also still have the borrower's account number attached to it as well. So they are still, flagged as being owned by that original borrower, but they will be held as in a separate part of the vault as collateral for the term of the loan. Trying to think if there's anything else we do. So as I mentioned, we require 135% collateral. Should that at any point during the term of the loan fall to 120%, for example, so the metals are now worth $120,000, we will then issue a margin call, so to speak, and give the client 7 days to either add more metals to the value of the collateral or pay down a portion of that loan. At 110%, which we've never had to do, but if the value of the collateral were to fall to 110%, we would immediately liquidate that loan in order to protect the lender's capital. So as far as it, as from a risk perspective, it's quite safe as far as, both for the borrower and for the lender, because, how often do we see, prices of precious metals retrace 25%, in short order. So that's the business model as a whole. You said you might have some follow-up questions as far as risk is concerned.
Yeah, so just to be clear, this is not SWP lending money or gold. It's a client of SWP that has the capital and a client that has metal and needs liquidity, and you match the two together with
Correct.
A premium so that both parties are settled and happy. And you're making sure that nobody is losing money beyond the contract value.
Yeah, essentially we facilitate the loan, and then, I myself, I come in, the first thing I do every morning is, plug in the current London fixed prices for the day, manage those margins, make sure all of our loans are compliant. I keep a very close eye on that throughout the day, but again, typically, prices of metals aren't moving such that, I have to pay it too much mind after, the start of the day. But yeah, we're basically acting as the facilitator for both the borrower and the lender.
Okay. Derek is asking if this applies if the bullion was held in a vault in one of the other storage facilities. So for example, if they would store in Switzerland, is this still available or not?
It's only available in the Cayman vault, unfortunately. I think as far as, there's a few different reasons for that. So Mark mentioned, obviously this facility is owned and operated by Strategic Wealth Preservation. Our other locations are facilities from partners. So it might be a Loomis Vault location, a Brinks location, and it's simply too cumbersome to be asking them to move metals around and into different, into different bins and locations within the vault. I think it's more easily managed and operated for us within this vault location.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, Denisa. Each jurisdiction that you want to offer these types of loans would actually require, depending on the local regulations, generally requires a lending license, which we have here in Grand Cayman. Lending licenses in Grand Cayman are rather simple and straightforward. However, in the United States, for example, they have very strong consumer protection laws around lending licenses. It kind of falls into the same regulatory framework as credit cards, which, if you know anything about the US credit card market, is kind of a disaster. You've got a lot of fraud and a lot of consumers that are taken advantage of by credit card companies. Therefore, it's extremely cumbersome and expensive to hold a lending license, and therefore we simply have not committed to those expenses in other jurisdictions.
Yes. And it's also a point that I think it's worth raising from a risk perspective to the people that are concerned about their metals being stored with SWP. I mean, the precious metal dealer entity, and that is that you're not mixing the two together, right? So the moment that somebody decides to take liquidity against their metal, you're taking the metal physically from this facility dedicated to SWP storage and put it in a separate part that is dedicated to a sort of I interpret it as an physical escrow place where, it's where you put all the gold that is under, let's say, encumbered.
Yeah, and to be clear, any client who is not choosing to either be a borrower or potentially an investor is not affected at all and not involved at all in these transactions. Their precious metals are in the custody of Strategic Wealth Preservation, the original entity we've been discussing, and have absolutely nothing to do with Strategic Wealth Capital.
So if this fails for whatever reason as SWP Capital, then nothing happens to the other entity, which is the vault provider, correct?
Correct. There is no overlap or use of assets from one entity to the other at all. It's not a question of SWP Capital is not leasing metals, SWP is not leasing metals or anything of that nature, which you might see, for example, in a financial institution that's storing metal on behalf of clients. That doesn't occur here. We don't offer that service.
Okay, and clients can certify this through your audits, your frequent audits, and they can even visit the facility, as far as I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. We welcome clients to visit either here in Grand Cayman or any of the other locations, even that are managed by our partner vaults. That's one of the requirements that we have, that they be able to visit and conduct self-audits. So not a problem at all.
All right. Floyd is asking, can transfers of stored items be made from SWP location to another, so between vaults? And would this be a sale and repurchase or a physical shipping of the metal or swap, or how does it work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we have the logistics team. So client comes to us and says, I want to move some metals from Singapore to Grand Cayman. Much the same as shipping from another outside entity. we would ask our logistics team to provide a quote for that. Subsequently, we can also look at, all right, what would happen in the case that we bought the metals back from the client in Singapore and sold them either the same or, different metals here in the Cayman Islands. We can, look at both those costs and kind of weigh those against each other and make the best decision for the client. So there's a couple of different options there at play. And, of course, we'll provide, as many different options as possible so the client can make the most informed decision.
Okay, I hope this addresses your question, Floyd. Elaine is also asking about the loan terms that, again, typically they are between 1 to 12 months or more. And what's the interest rate that applies typically?
6, 9, or 12 months are the 4 different term lengths that we offer. And then when the loan comes due, there is an option to renew. So I typically reach out to clients about a month in advance just to remind them that the loan is coming due, give them either the repayment options or renewal. If they choose to renew, I will then go to the lender and say, are you interested in renewing this loan? If the lender were to say no, it's as simple as me going out and finding another lender. Our lenders are very active and very happy to take on new deals, so that wouldn't be a problem in any case. What was the follow-up question there?
What's the interest rate?
Oh, interest rate. Yeah, US Prime +1, which is 8.5% at present.
All right.
And then I should make mention, as far as other fees are concerned, so for the metals that are used as collateral, you are paying your storage fees up front for the term of the loan. So that is actually beneficial in some cases to clients, as we've seen in the last year, gold being up 30% in 2024. Anyone who took a loan at the beginning of the year essentially saved money on their storage fees because, they weren't paying in subsequent quarters. They paid that up front and, came out on top. As far as papering fees, we do have a 1% arrangement fee over $100,000 or 1.5% if the loan value is below $100,000. And those are the entirety of the fees for any borrowers.
Okay, thank you very much. If Elaine or anyone has any follow-up questions, we have posted Jeremy's contact details on Maverick Social in the trusted directory. We'll provide a link to those so you can ask him additional questions. Anything else that you would like to add? Conscious of time, we don't have much time left, but is there anything else that you would like to add before we close this?
From my side, just want to thank everyone for joining. I do look forward to speaking with your members. Please do use me as a resource if you have any questions, happy to answer any follow-up questions that come to mind. And yeah, looking forward to meeting all of you and working more closely with you in the future.
For myself, Denise, I wanted to echo Jeremy's thoughts. Thank you for joining. We look forward to the relationship with the Mavericks group. It's been exciting thus far. I think in terms of the world views that we all share, in terms of choosing precious metals as a strategic asset class, I think there's a lot of commonality there, and it's something that we're very good at, and we look forward to servicing your members to the best of our ability.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I will also want to add that for the people here and for the people watching the replay, Mark and Strategic Wealth Preservation agreed to provide a special discount to the annual storage fees to the members. We will be mentioning this in a detailed newsletter, what this looks like, but there is a preferential storage rate for Mavericks members. And there is also a discount on shipping metal across jurisdiction if you're using SWP. All right, and last but not least, I would like to say, remind everyone actually that there is an upcoming Mavericks Mastermind in the Cayman Islands, and that's going to be in June, between 5 to 8 of June. We're still finalizing the dates with the primary venue. What's important to know is that Mark is going to be there for the event. And he has also offered to organize short tours to the Gold Vault facility for those that are interested. The availability will be very limited, but we will announce how you can apply to be part of the tour once we open up the registrations for the event. And that's it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denisa.